Hello, everyone out there in podcast world. Hope you're having a wonderful day. You are listening to the Service Business Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Tersh. Today's episode, we're talking to Brendan Kane. You may have seen a few of his books out. I have Hook Point here, and I love it. I listened to it, I've read it, and it's really cool about just how to stand out in a 3-second world when it comes to social media and just connecting with your followers and your potential clients. But with that being said, welcome to the show, Brendan.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to connect with you and everybody that's watching or listening to this.
So tell us a little bit about Hook Point and kind of where it came from and your background in general.
It's a great question because Hook Point came out of having to really look back on the past 15 years of business and understand what I'm really good at, more for myself than anything, is really, dial in, what do I want to do with my life? I've done so many things in career, and it's where do I provide the most value? And a lot of people know me from my first book, around 1 million followers, how I built a massive social audience in 30 days. And I kind of got labeled as the social media guy, but I just look back at my experience and it's I do so much more for companies and brands and clients than just generating followers and social media, which we're good at. But I feel there was something missing, or there was something missing from the overarching story. So when I kind of looked back at all the things and, how I started, I went to film school to want to be a film producer. And I was hoping that when I go to film school, they'll teach you about business. And when I showed up, I quickly realized they don't teach you anything about business in film school. So I figured the best way to really learn about business is start your own. So I started a few internet companies while I was going to college because it was the most cost efficient way. Mm-hmm. And then when I moved to Los Angeles in 2005 to pursue a career in film, it's when the entertainment industry started to reawaken to digital after the dot-com bust. So when I showed up, I started like everybody else at the bottom, making coffee and copies and deliveries. And I'm sure you've heard the entertainment industry is one of the most competitive and cutthroat industries. So when I was this assistant, people would ask me, well, what do you want to do? Or why are you in LA? And I would say, well, I want to be a film producer. And I could just see everybody's eyes glaze over because I was just one of a million other people moving to LA to pursue the same thing. So I knew I needed to find a way to stand out, and a hook point of what I call it now. And I just took a step back and I would listen to the conversations happening in the studio. And what I realized is there was a sense of anxiety and panic that would come over the office when we finished a movie, because we spent tens of millions, in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars on a single piece of content. And now we need hundreds of millions of people around the world to know about it in just a few short months to just have any chance of making sure we don't lose money. So with that, I just, started kind of saying, hey, listen, I started these internet companies in college. I know how to tap into these traffic sources through websites, blogs, and then social media was just starting. Because remember, this was back in 2005. I would love to help you because there's very cost-efficient ways and often free ways that we can scale your message. Would that be helpful? And they said yes. So that was kind of the first iteration of the hook point that I created for myself to get my foot in the door and go from making coffee to creating a digital division for the first studio I worked for. And then from there, I just kind of kept going. I got bored with the movie industry because people think it's such a sexy and creative thing, but it's just another corporation. Right. And I'm of the mindset that I love to do things and create things rather than spending time asking permission to do them. So I left and I started building my own technology platforms and licensing them back to big media companies. So I had to go into the room with a Yahoo, a Facebook, a MTV, a Viacom, or even celebrities like a Taylor Swift, and express the value or the hook to first get the meeting, but then hold that attention and lead to a potential deal. So that's kind of where this concept of hook points started out, and where I had to I had to get good at it. Otherwise, I was going to be stuck making coffee for years and years and waiting to work my way up the ladder. And as an entrepreneur yourself, that's just not kind of worth it for us.
Yeah, 100%. So could you share a little bit about how you came into the room with Taylor Swift and how that it's in your book. And I love how you kind of laid it out there, how she wants to interact with, or how she wanted to be able to work and kind of persuade that, convey that message and be able to change it constantly, and how you went in actually had a conversation with them. Can you share that story?
Absolutely. And it's kind of a longer process than people would think, because the introduction came through MTV. So I initially got to MTV and structured licensing partnerships with them with two technologies I built. And early on in the process, the executive at MTV is like, hey, do you want to go meet this girl, Taylor Swift? She's going to be a big star. I think she's right for your technology. And at the time, she wasn't a huge star. Like, she was on the inflection, because the first time I ever met her and her manager was backstage at Grammy's like rehearsal or something. So she was on her way, but she wasn't the key global superstar there. Some people may be saying, well, how did you get a meeting with MTV, or how did you get a deal?
Right.
That started with, working in the movie industry. And I made a connection while I was working in one studio with another woman that worked at Paramount, and she brought me to Viacom and MTV through that. But once I said, okay, yeah, let's meet with her, because I'm down to meet anybody that, this person was recommending, because he's a really trusted source. Then it's a series of processes with big name brands or celebrities. So the first meeting was with the manager, which, as I mentioned, was like at this rehearsal backstage at the Grammys. Taylor came in for maybe a minute singing or something, and was like just a general introduction. But the whole focus of the meeting was just on the manager. I knew that. I didn't want to get distracted trying to grab Taylor's attention or anything, because what I had to do first was I had to understand how the manager perceived the business, what the manager perceived as their challenges were, the goals, so that I could then articulate our technology to fulfill whatever he saw as their challenges, and also the opportunity. So after that, then he's like, okay, this sounds good, but you need to go talk to Taylor's dad. So then same process, had to do with Taylor's dad. Then it became, I had to then talk to Taylor's mom to get her buy-in, because her parents were very involved in her career early on. And then it became the meeting with Taylor. And again, by that time, I was collecting information from each of the people, the manager, the father, the mother, and even MTV, of like how Taylor perceived the world, what she loved, what she didn't like, and all of those things. And then I would use that information in the meeting. Now, again, in any of these meetings I'll go in, I still have to read body language, tone, responses, because you may get all this information about a person, but then you show up, right, and their personality is completely different, because they just came from a horrible meeting, or they're on the top of the world and everything's exciting to them. Right. So when I went into that meeting with Taylor, I took away some key points from the other meetings I had. Is one, she really liked to have hands-on control with her brand, because she built her fan base herself. She built it one by one, and she's the genius behind her success. She didn't have a huge record label or millions of dollars in marketing budget when she first started out. It was her ability to tap into social media, foster these one-to-one connections with fans, turn them into brand advocates. And because it was happening in a time where social media was emerging, these brand advocates were now sharing with thousands or tens of thousands of people. So that was one key takeaway. The other key takeaway was the whole team was frustrated with the fact that her official site at the time was an all-flash site, would take 48 hours to update. The bounce rate off the homepage was like 96%. It just wasn't fulfilling the goals that they were looking for. And the technology that we ultimately did the deal around was it was a application that could dynamically write code for you. So you could drag and drop anything onto the screen, and our system would write the code for you. So this was really prior to like Squarespace and Wix, and it was more of an enterprise level. Mm-hmm. So what we did for Taylor, just to show her the power of this, we literally built her an entirely new site in less than 6 hours. And then when we walked into the meeting, I just said, hey, here's the mouse. You can change any element. You can change the navigation. We can change the entire background of the site, all within like 2 clicks, no code or anything. So that's kind of like the key points. And the meeting with I think the first meeting was like over an hour. Like there's multiple aspects, but those were the key things that I really dialed into is one, control. because I knew she and her team wanted that of this official site. And two, the creative expression and the ability for this technology to foster stronger relationships with her fans and these brand advocates that meant so much to her. And then even after that, we had to go through another meeting with her agents, and it was like a team of like 10 people at an agency. Wow. So when you're doing deals of that size, I'm not going to say every time it's like that, but it's a lengthy process. Like doing deals with MTV, it takes 6 months minimum to get done, to go through all the paperwork and all of that. So yeah, that's just kind of a little background of those meetings.
Tell me, you mentioned a couple times that even here now that you needed to fill out the room, and you needed to make sure that you could pivot anytime on any conversation. Whenever we're going in and presenting stuff to clients, most of our listeners here are going to be service business owners, so plumbers, electricians, and stuff like that. In your opinion, should we get a template that it's always the same every single time? Or we're going to be more successful if we actually draw it out in front of them? Which way are you leaning there? I mean,
yeah, it's a great question. And in my experience, my opinion is, and I've done both sides of it. Yeah. I've gone into meetings with a demo, a pitch deck, a presentation already planned out, and you just go dive directly into it. Mm-hmm. And can you be successful with it? Sure. But you can also shoot yourself in the foot with it. And we've seen this with, major deals that we're going after. If we're going after like a Disney or a Microsoft or a Netflix, going into those meetings, what we found the best approach is get to know the person on the other side of the table. I'm not saying their personal life or stuff like that. Understand what their job responsibility is, what their biggest pain point or challenge is, how they perceive the world, what is of the most value to them. And this can be applied to anybody, a plumber, whoever. Is we've found that when you start that way, you glean a lot of information about how they perceive the world, how they perceive challenges, obstacles, and then you can go into the value of your service on how it pertains to solving that problem. Because the other way, and I've seen this with ourselves, I've seen this with other people, is if you start just with the pitch, you may be talking about things that they don't care about, or you may turn them off right away. So I've always found that you can really glean a lot and hone in what you're going to present to them by collecting information and data first.
So I guess we'll pivot a little bit, but it kind of goes with that, what you've said there. How much does storytelling involved in making a successful quote unquote pitch? I know you're a fan, and likewise am I, of getting rid of the elevator pitch altogether. But how storytelling? I love storytelling. I'm not a great storyteller, and that's one of the main reasons why I picked up your book. But I want to hear what you have to say about storytelling and mastering the art of that, and how that kind of goes into the conversation you would have with like a Taylor Swift or, MTV or, a homeowner that needs their toilets replaced.
Yeah. So there's different types of stories you can tell. Like when we talk about storytelling, most people think, oh, it's like a narrative. You're telling them like a children's bedtime story, or like the Taylor Swift story that we just covered, which are effective, but you don't necessarily have to do it. Like if you're a plumber or, some service-based business, or like an electrician, do you really need to tell like stories about other clients? You can, it's effective. But the other form of a story is, again, just how you take in this information of like, okay, this is what the client is experiencing, the problems and challenges. And then you can just basically express, this is how I'll overcome that challenge for you, or help you with that challenge. And that is a story in and of itself. It doesn't have to be like a narrative beginning, middle, and an end. It could just be, okay, this is what you're presenting. This is, what we're going to, bring back. The storytelling that I typically do is more case study driven. like what I talked about with Taylor Swift, or if I go into another meeting, I'll talk about how I worked with another client to achieve certain results, and I'll tell a story that way. But the most important thing that I have found is less about, it's less about telling a story and more about how are you solving this person's greatest pain point. And the best way that I can describe this to everybody listening or watching to this is just imagine that I come up to you on the street and I say, hey, I know, and you think in your head, like, what is the thing that keeps you up at night? What causes you stress, anxiety? It could be personal, it could be professional, whatever. The thing that just really consciously is just driving you crazy, your biggest pain. And I come up to you on the street and say, hey, listen, I know you're experiencing this pain. I would love to solve this for you. I mean, who's going to say no to that? We all want our greatest problems and challenges solved. Absolutely. So that's exactly what you're doing in these meetings. Like if you're a plumber or electrician, maybe you're not solving their greatest problem, but you can figure out how the problem is impacting them or any service that your service or product or whatever you're selling can provide value to overcome that obstacle.
Yeah, I love that. That is really good. I mean, and I love how you simplified it too, because I tend to overcomplicate things. And so it's like, just come in, find out their pain point, have the conversation with them, and then go back to them and just share with them how you're going to solve that pain point, how you're going to solve that fear or that unknown, the uncertainty. And with service businesses, a lot of times people don't experience working with service businesses a lot. So then the entire experience itself is unknown. And so just having that clear story even built out, I think would be a great idea for any service business.
Yeah. I mean, I just kind of break it down to, I personally don't like selling. It just, I don't feel comfortable doing it. Yeah. And so for myself, and I think the reason I'm able to operate at the level I am and close the clients I have is I don't go in and sell anything. I go in and solve problems. Yeah. I go in and I really try to understand what is this person's greatest problem that is correlating to the service that I can provide. And then I just present the solution to that problem as our service. I'm not selling. I'm just saying this is one way you can approach it. And 98% of the time where we close a client, it's just because of that. And there's really very little conversation after that. Some cases like in the Taylor Swifts or the MTVs, there's drawn out negotiations and stuff, but typically like the deal closes in that initial conversation because you've built up enough excitement that you're going to solve this big problem or challenge for them. So
I feel like you're very similar to myself, and I don't like selling either. I like educating and creating that storyline, like you said. But whenever it comes time to ask for the close or ask for the sell, like how do you do that? Like what in your experience? For me, that's kind of a struggle. A lot of people that is their struggle, even if especially if they quote unquote aren't salespeople. So how do you do that?
So there's two approaches. One approach is, and I've used this a lot, is when they say, okay, well, what is the pricing or how do we go from here? Typically, I don't like talking about pricing. I don't feel comfortable. So I say, I'll shoot you over an email that, just here's with the pricing and the structure and how it all works. Yeah. Because what it does is takes that pressure off of you if you don't feel comfortable talking about pricing or you don't feel comfortable in negotiating right there on the spot. Mm-hmm. Some sales experts would probably advise against that. Right. But I kind of typically like doing that approach. It works better for me. And, with an electrician or a plumber, it's a bit different. I think you could just, the pricing is not huge. But the other approach that we've employed more is, and this is when you start getting bigger or you create a partner, is I have a sales team. I have a team that talks them through everything, closes the deal, the paperwork, collects the payment, everything like that. So I like to provide both options because in the beginning, I wasn't big enough to have a sales team. And I didn't really want to take on a partner. And it wasn't that I didn't want to take on a partner. I just didn't have the right partner that I felt comfortable with. Right. And scaling the business with from that respect. So that's why I wanted to give two options. One is when you're just starting out, you can just play the email game with it. And number two, you can just get a partner, a VA or a salesperson to handle that part if it's not something you feel comfortable with or it's not something.
Yeah, perfect. Cool. So we only have a few minutes left here. Would you mind sharing just the brief story for those who don't know? First, before I do that, what's the best way to get your book?
I would go to the website book.hookpoint.com, because there you can get the physical book, the ebook, and the audio book all for just the cost of shipping the physical book.
Oh, nice. That's perfect. Okay, so my last question, your experience, how you kind of became the social media guy. Tell your story about gaining the 1 million followers and how that happened, and would you do it again type thing, or is it doable again?
Well, it's definitely doable. We've done it many, many times. People look at the cover of the book and then they just assume, they look at my social channels and they assume that that's all it is. First off, our team internally is amassed well over 50 million followers and 40 billion views. So it's pretty extensive, but also other people in the book that we feature have amassed amazing things. It's not just me. It's not just our strategies. I went off and interviewed friends and partners that have done remarkable things on social media, like an influencer that did 15 million followers in 15 months, a friend that created a company that's doing 3.5 billion views a month. So there's a well-rounded perspective of different expertise in that. So how did I get to it? Why did I do it? I did it because of everything we talked about. It was a hook point. So I had always been inspired by what Tim Ferriss did with the 4-Hour Workweek as a book, as a ground pillar for a brand. And I had thought about doing a book for a long time, but again, because of my start in the entertainment industry, I was trained to think big. So if I'm going to do something like a book, I want to make sure that it has a strong hook to really grab people's attention and give it the best chance of success, because it's something like there's over 1.7 million books released every year. Wow. It's so noisy and crowded. So I had spent about 3.5 years developing the methodologies that allowed me to do it. It wasn't like I just woke up one morning and did it. I created these systems through trial and error of working with big brands, celebrities, journalists on how to scale their brand through different KPIs, whether it was views, shareability, clicks, traffic, and then in some cases, followers. All of those objectives uses the same methodology. I just started getting asked to use it for followers, specifically with Facebook at the time. So I knew I could do it. It wasn't a matter of if I could do it, it was a matter of why I should do it. So I thought, okay, I know I can generate 1 million followers in 30 days. Would it be interesting for me to do it for somebody that's a nobody, not a celebrity or a professional athlete or musician, to start from scratch and just show what's possible? So what I did is I called up a literary agent that I was connected with, who's represented over $5 billion worth of book sales. So very well-versed in the market, very successful. And I just asked him, hey, I'm thinking about doing this experiment of generating 1 million followers in 30 days. And do you think that's a strong enough hook for a book? And I said, would you sign me as a client and represent me and get me a publishing deal? And he said, yes. So I knew that was the first indication. So that's why I did it. I did it 1 million followers in 100 countries in 30 days on Facebook first. And then subsequently, I created a system for building 1 million followers on Instagram. But the whole motivation behind it was I knew that there was a lot of information that from myself and also my partners that I wanted to share with the world to help people get their message out there. But I knew that the only way to do it was to have a strong hook to bring people in, to teach them what they need to know. So one of the principles we talk about is there's a big difference between what people want and what people need. And oftentimes people fail in sales or scaling their business because they're focusing too much on the need that they know the customer or the client has or needs to have, but the customer or client isn't there. So for example, I know that people need to know how to test content. I know they need to understand the psychology of communication to successfully create content, the value and the importance of strategic partnerships, all of these things. But if I would have led with any of those, like if the book title was The Art of A/B Testing right. on social media platforms, it would fall flat. So I start with the want of followers. So it's 1 million followers in 30 days of how I did it. And it's in the book is like, okay, if you really want followers, then these are all the things you need to know how to master. And that's kind of how the progression of how that hook came about. Now, just a quick kind of background of how I accomplished this on Facebook and Instagram for ourselves and for our clients. Facebook, we developed a system on top of the Facebook advertising platform, not using it as a media buying tool, but using it as a market research tool to identify content formats, themes, and structures that are highly shareable. So I would just test all of these content. I would test like 300 content variations every night. And I would wake up in the morning, look at the results, see what was being shared at the highest velocity, and use those learnings to fuel the next set of tests at midnight. And I would just do that over and over again to the tune of testing 5,000 variations of content in 30 days. Now, when I say 5,000 variations, it's not 5,000 individual pieces of content. I'll take one piece of content and test it 100, 200 different ways, because it gives us more chances to win and more chances to learn. So that's how we were able to scale with Facebook. Instagram's different. The Facebook ad platform just doesn't work the same when it applies to Instagram it does with Facebook. So we had to create a new testing methodology and process of distributing content on other high traffic and high follower count accounts. So we have like one partner that has 5 million followers. So we'll test content variations organically through his account to see which drives the highest motivation of somebody clicking back and following our account or our client's account. And then once we have that winning variation, then we have a network of 15 other accounts that we can syndicate that content out to.
Huh. Well, that's cool. I love that. And that's all split. And that's all broken down in the other book. Sure.
Yeah, it's Hook Point actually has a lot of the testing methodologies in it as too. I would say for service-based businesses, Hook Point is the best place to start.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, because whenever service businesses aren't flashy, they're not, it's not glamorous. And so for me, I've always had a struggle, like, what is my hook point? Like, how do I get a hook? And then I didn't use those exact questions and terms until I discovered your book. And then I was like, oh yes, that's the question that I've been looking for, how to answer that question. So yeah, that's awesome. And I'm super.
Yeah. And I just want to say that any service can be sexy. Any service can take off online. Like we just worked with a dentist and repositioned her whole thing.
Really?
There's a great YouTube channel called Clear Tax Value. And he's a tax accountant, but he's blowing up. He's at 1.2 million subscribers.
Wow.
And the average view rate is like 300,000 to 500,000 views. There's a doctor called Dr. Mike that has, I don't even know what he's at right now, 6 or 7 million subscribers. So we often get that question asked is like, well, can this work? I know you worked with all these big celebrities and media companies, but can this work for me, my small business? Or, I don't think my industry is sexy. Every industry can be contextualized with a hook point to grab attention.
Sweet. Boom. Mic drop. Thank you. Where can people learn more about you, follow you, and just learn more about Hook Point and everything that y'all do?
Yeah, if people have interest, I would just check out hookpoint.com. If they want to connect with me, they can direct message me on Instagram at Brendan Kane, or they can check out my personal website, brendanjkane.com.
Perfect, Brendan. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And thank you, everybody who's listening to or watching this episode of the Service Business Mastery Podcast. It is a podcast focused on service business owners, managers, and technicians who are considering becoming business owners themselves. I hope you found value in today's episode. My entire target with this show is to help answer some unasked questions. And a lot of times when we're first starting out, we don't even know to ask about anything like a hook point. But with that being said, I hope you have a wonderful and safe week. And until we talk again next time.